What's up, everyone? It's Q from Retro Q Gaming, and today Capcom announced that they're going to remaster Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6 for current gen consoles. So that's a bit strange, but anyway, they've said that they're going to release actually pretty soon, which is even stranger, really, and that Resident Evil 6 is going to be the first one arriving, which is even stranger. I mean, when you announce 4, 5, and 6, you would expect 4 to come first and then 5 and then 6. Anyway, that's beside the point. Resident Evil 6 is going to be remastered and released on current gen consoles in March. It's going to be fairly cheap. They've quoted at about $20 or €20 so far. So that's Resident Evil 6. Resident Evil 5 is going to follow after, and that's going to be released at some point in summer. Again, current gen consoles. I'm assuming all these are going to be digital, by the way. Maybe by the end of the year or at some point next year, they might release an actual physical version with all three of them on it. Can't imagine they'd do just $20 releases on physical discs just by themselves for all three games separately. Anyway, they've also said that by the end of the year, they will release Resident Evil 4 remastered for current gen consoles. Now, like I just said a second ago, possibly at some point early next year or towards the end of the year, we'll actually see a disc-based collection with the three of them on it. Now, here's where it gets a little bit interesting, or a little bit, this is where my thoughts on the whole thing come into it. So, straight up, now this will possibly come off as, PC Master Racist or LOL consoles bashing, whatever. Take it as you will, but I guarantee you it's not that. And yeah, I'll explain it why, and I think it comes off pretty objectively based on the history and everything that's gone on so far. So the way I'm expecting this, now keep in mind I could be wrong. I know nothing of the details of all this, and I'm not working at Capcom, or I don't see anything that no one else sees. So the way I think of it, we'll work in order, not in order of release, but we'll work in order of original release. So I think Resident Evil 4 remaster, that's going to come out at the end of the year on the consoles, I think that is going to be the current Ultimate Evil edition of Resident Evil 4 that we have on PC. I'd say it's probably that edition, probably cranked up to max settings, and now here's where the part where I think people will call me a fanboy or PC Master Racist, but the reason why I'm going to say this, and I'll explain it as well, is I do think it will be capped at 30 FPS on the consoles, simply because we've all seen historically that a lot of third-party ports and things like that don't get the proper development and proper remastering as they need to go. For example, not even going to touch on all the other games. Well, I mean, I'll briefly mention like one or two. Darksiders, Dishonored. There's so many others as well that have not got a proper love and care. But at the same time, I also think that it is partially to do with the console hardware. Console hardware is not fantastic. Obviously, it being a console and it's one set platform, they can squeeze more out of the equivalent, more out of the consoles than you would the equivalent PC hardware. I'm not debating that. That's not for debate at all. I mean, I completely agree that that is how it works. But that's one of the benefits of having a closed console platform and fixed hardware. But at the same time, it's because the hardware is still, I don't want to say underwhelming. It's just the console, it is what it is. The hardware is there, it's set, it's limited. We all know the limitations of it by now. We've seen the remasters and just some of the games in general, the problems and performance issues that some of them have had. So you couple that with what I would just call lazy development and lazy porting, and that's why I think it's going to be Resident Evil 4 Ultimate Evil Edition, as we have on the PC, cranked up to max and capped at 30 FPS. Now, I could be wrong. If that comes off at 60 FPS, good for the console people, good for the console players. That's all I can say. It's certainly not a bad thing. I'm not trying to hold on to 60 FPS. I'm just saying that's the way, based on history, I think that would be. And especially because Resident Evil 4 port, the Ultimate Evil Edition, like the one on PC now, isn't the most demanding game as it is. Not only that, but it's also not really much of a great port. I did make a video on it at one point before that there was actually two guys completely redoing a HD texture pack by themselves for Resident Evil 4, the Ultimate Evil Edition. and basically it looks absolutely fantastic. These two guys doing it by themselves make an absolute mockery of Capcom's whole porting team and reassessing team. I mean, it's just a joke, really, what the way Capcom did it. So that's all that anyway. Now, there is a trailer out for this entire thing. There's a trailer out for the collection. I have not seen it. I will say that. I have not seen it. I've seen the links to it and all that, but I haven't actually watched it. I will have a link to it in the description below, so you can check it out for yourself and go from there. Bear in mind, again, I'm not sure about this, but if the video is in 60 FPS, we all know that that is not indicative of the finished product. Perfect example, Batman Arkham Knight PC version. There was what was the other one I was looking at more recently where it struck me again, the Arbiter announcement trailer for season 3 of Killer Instinct on Xbox One and PC. That trailer's in 60 FPS. The game on console is only 30 FPS. So yeah, you get the whole idea. It's obviously not indicative of the actual finished product and all that as well. So having said all that, we'll move on from Resident Evil 4 to Resident Evil 5. Now, Resident Evil 5 released on the PS3 and the 360, and then it was then later released on the PC. Now, I love Resident Evil 5. I also love Resident Evil 4, but Resident Evil 5 has a special place in my heart. I know I've said it in like so many videos at this point, but Resident Evil 5 is one of my games that just has massive amounts of replayability for me. It's one of those games where I keep installed almost all the time. And if I'm just sitting there thinking, oh, I'm bored for 15 minutes, I'll quickly bang out a level of something, I'll turn on Resident Evil 5. That's how it goes for me. I had so many ridiculous amounts of hours in Resident Evil 5 on the Xbox 360. I had so many ridiculous amounts of hours on the Games for Windows Live version when it first released on Steam, by the way. Well, it first released on disc on PC, and it was the Games for Windows Live version. We all know Games for Windows Live is fucked at this point, and it's gone, and all the stuff, well, a lot of the stuff carefully eventually got ported over. So I had a ridiculous amount of time in that. I had almost all the achievements. I was just about to get like the last one or two when, out of nowhere, like 2 years after the announcement, Steam finally finished their porting of the Games for Windows Live code, and it got ported over to the Steam version, which disabled the achievements unless you re-downloaded the whole thing into beta format, blah blah blah. It was more trouble than I was willing to do. But anyway, I've been playing through a ridiculous amount of time in even the Steam version. So when you couple the three of them together, I don't even want to know at this point the amount of time in the game. So that's why it's a bit of a special place for me for Resident Evil 5. Anyway, I kind of segued a little bit off topic on that one. So we go back to Resident Evil 5. Now, Resident Evil 5 on the 360 and the PS3. I haven't played it on the PS3 version myself. A friend of mine has. He's been playing it on the PS3 as his main one. But even on the 360, so I'll assume PS3 was arguably the same, if not a little bit worse, simply because of the cell. Yes, that's pretty much fact at this point. People, there's no thing out there that for multiplats generally worked worse on the PS3 simply because they were ported from they were developed on the 360 for the most part and then ported over. Yes, it's lazy. Yes, it's unfortunate. It just happened. Deal with it. Anyway. So, with the gameplay and performance issues, not so much the gameplay issues, but the actual performance issues of Resident Evil 5 on consoles, with the extremely low settings on the consoles as well, the console equivalent settings, I should say. I think what we will see in Resident Evil 5 in the remastered versions, I think we're going to see... Okay, oh yeah, I forgot to mention it before, but in Resident Evil 4, I think it will be 1080p as well. So, Resident Evil 5, I think we'll see 1080p, and almost solid 30 FPS. I think there will be one or two issues, at like one or two very specific animations or very specific parts in the game. And other than that, I think it will be a solid 30 FPS, and I think it will be max settings, or possibly have anti-aliasing tweaked a little bit. But I think other than that, it would be max settings. So I'm thinking 1080p, 30 FPS, 99% of the time. Maxed settings, possibly one little tweak on maybe anti-aliasing. Now, I could be wrong. Like I said, Resident Evil 5 is an old game at this point. Game came out in 2009, I believe. Start of 2009, I think it was. And yeah, it's been a while now. By comparison, even though my computer, I'm still running my old computer at this point, but on an i7 2600K with a GTX 690, I can max out that game with a constant 120 FPS, max settings, obviously I said maxed out, at 1440p. So I don't think, given the hardware in the consoles, I don't think it's unreasonable for the consoles to be able to do a maxed, if not slightly maxed because of the anti-aliasing, 1080p, 30 FPS 90% of the time. I could be wrong, it could go higher, it could be, the anti-aliasing could stick up full, and the FPS could go higher for all I know. So that would be a nice boon for the console players. So that's basically how that goes. I've talked way too much about Resident Evil 5, so I'm going to try go to Resident Evil 6 and keep it a little bit shorter. So when it comes to Resident Evil 6, now I'm going to open with something here. It's personally, Resident Evil 6 to me is, and this is, I'm using this word correctly, it is literally the worst game I have ever played. As of right now, as of the 25th of the 2nd, 2016, Resident Evil 6 is literally the worst game I've ever played. I'm not even going to get into all the other games in the list and all, but it is just so bad. I hate it on practically every level. And a perfect example of, say, where the remaster comes into it. When you look at Resident Evil 6 back on the Xbox 360 or PS3, I never played the full game on 360. I did play the demo, the one that came with Dragon's Dogma, and a friend of mine, he had Dragon's Dogma. He didn't have the internet, so he gave me the code and I downloaded Resident Evil 6, or at least the demo for it. And the graphics quality on that was pretty poor by just standards. So Resident Evil 6 on consoles was basically on the lowest quality settings almost, if not completely, on when it comes to comparison of the PC version. And because there were so many different options and so many more options on the updated engine for the PC version and all, and just the general nature of the game, the fast-pacedness and the more action-orientated stuff, especially with some of the big set pieces and effects and all that as well. I think for Resident Evil 6, we'll see 1080p. I think we'll see 30 FPS, if not locked 30 FPS, if not then close, with the exception of a couple of things when big stuff happens and all. There's a couple of pieces just in my mind right off the top of my head that could just trigger a drop to under 30 FPS, maybe to like 28 or something. And I think we'll see, I don't think we'll see maxed out settings on when it comes to Resident Evil 6, but I think we'll see near maxed out settings. Now, again, I've mentioned it before in this video. You can bash me if you want for, you probably think I'm coming off as a PC master racist or whatever, but again, based on history has proved with the hardware in the consoles and the lack of development resources put into some of these ports, I think I have a valid reason for I've got a valid reason for expecting this kind of thing from almost anyone, basically, with the exception of maybe Microsoft or Naughty Dog. Yeah, it's basically how I expect most third-party ports to go. So that's pretty much how all that goes. And I'm rolling up on the end of the video here. One thing I want to talk about as well is that I was discussing these today with a friend of mine, and he's the same as me. He's played Resident Evil 5. Myself and him played Resident Evil 5 forever on the 360. We both played Resident Evil 4 back on the GameCube. We both played loads of Resident Evil 4 on the PC. Hell, we both even got Resident Evil 4 on the shitty, well, I won't say shitty, but it's shitty by comparison. When it was re-released on the 360 as well, we both played that one. He played Resident Evil 5 with me on the Xbox 360 a lot. He played with my other friend on the PS3 for a little bit, the one I mentioned a little bit earlier. And he played through almost all of Resident Evil 6 on the Xbox 360, as well as a little bit on the PS3, and I think he played some of it on the PC as well. But he has a decent computer. He's enough to max it out at 1080p, probably 60 FPS. Most likely 60 FPS for his one. So, I was speaking with him. That was just to give a little bit of background information. For comparison, by the way, his PC has a 4770K and a GTX 780, so we're roughly about the same when it comes to GPU power, and where processing power just completely destroys anything from the previous or current consoles. But that's not from a fanboy bashing issue. Don't worry, that's just for clarification. Anyway, the reason why I bring all this up is I was talking with him earlier about it. And he was thinking, he was just saying, oh, why don't they just fully remaster them and just do it properly? I'm like, okay, hang on. When Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6 came out on the previous gen consoles, they were basically at the lowest quality settings of the version of the game. They ran at mostly ran at 720p resolution, because even on the 360 and PS3 games would not there's very few that would run at 1080p, simply because it was just too taxing for the GPU. So they had to run with choppy frame rates, screen tearing, low resolutions, so most likely 720p resolution, and just extremely low graphics quality settings. So I said to him, it's like, well, if they were to say, let's say, put in locked 30 FPS, or almost locked 30 FPS, maybe even 60 as a big boon, a big benefit. But I'm just using this is what I said to him. If they put in 1080p, 30 FPS, maxed or near maxed graphics settings, it's basically, because of going from the lowest to the highest or almost highest, it's basically a remaster as far as they go. Because there's just so much of a difference in it that it's basically a full remaster. And he said, oh, well, what about the people on PC? And I just said to him, well, these remasters aren't coming out on PC because they're already out on PC in the forms of, GTA, in the forms of Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6 max settings. It's just that simple. So that's the way I see it anyway. I could be wrong. Again, I'll have a link to the actual video, the announcement trailer below. Again, if it is in 60 FPS, it's not indicative of the finished product. But if it is indicative of the finished product, and it does turn out to be 60 FPS, that is a big plus for the console players. It's because you're obviously getting much better performance. Twice the performance, actually. And yeah, it's definitely worth it. It's a big benefit. So that's where I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm going to leave it there, because this video has gone on way longer than I originally wanted it to. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. If they need a remaster, what you could possibly expect from the remaster, what you would be happy with, what you would be expecting, and then maybe even that they could go above and beyond and develop for, and deliver for, I should say. So let me know all that in the comments section below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter, details in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the rest of the videos in my channel.